Hello, everyone. I am the Comics Kid 2099, and I am joined by Connor Nielsen. Connor, how are you doing today?
I am doing very well. How about yourself?
I'm doing fantastic. We are doing another installment of the Podcast Boys. We went through just about everything Twin Peaks related, and so now we are talking about movies and TV shows that have alumni who are connected to Twin Peaks. And Connor chose the movie High Flying Bird the last time we spoke. So, Connor, why don't you tell us a little bit about High Flying Bird?
So this is Steven Soderbergh's 2019. I guess it was one of two films he released in 2019 on Netflix. So this is a Netflix film that was released in 2019 by Steven Soderbergh. It is the second and to the date, I believe it's the last movie that he shot entirely on an iPhone, but it takes you into the high stakes world of inside basketball. That I think we're gonna have to have a running tally on that pun. So inside basketball, you have Andre Holland as a sports agent, primarily for NBA players. We only see him with his NBA clients. His name is Ray Burke or Burke, and he is basically is right now the NBA. I believe this takes place in 2011. After doing some research, this takes place in 2011 during an NBA lockout, and his agency is sort of on the fringe of losing some talent. They're unsure about the future of their company because of people unsure about their contract and where things are going. So over the course of 72 hours, Ray sets out on a mission to keep everything as is and maybe improve his situation within his company. It also stars Zazie Beetz as his assistant. She's not his assistant for. I'll just say his assistant.
Mm-hmm.
You have Zachary Quinto, Melvin Gregg, Sonia Son, and then kind of showing up in surprise was Bill Duke. And
Mm-hmm.
we picked this because of Kyle MacLachlan, who actually, once it got started, I had forgotten he was even in this movie, but he does actually play a more significant role than I feared he might. So, anyways, uh, I've only seen a handful of Soderbergh movies. He's made just a ton of movies all over the board. So I was kind of interested. I know you've probably seen a few more than I have. I mean, you've probably seen the Ocean's movies. I have not, but I'm
I
curious.
actually, I've only seen part of the first Ocean's 11 movie, but I did watch Logan Lucky, and I like that movie quite a bit. And that's kind of a redneck Ocean's movie, I guess you could call it.
Yeah.
But
So, what did you think of High Flying Bird?
I didn't really like it. We've already established that I am not much of a sports person. I like if you told me gun to my head that I needed to tell you what the tight end does, I couldn't even tell you what sport has a tight end. That's how little I know about any of this stuff. So I've never really watched a lot of sports movies, but then I think potentially, even if I don't know anything about baseball, The Natural was still a really good movie that kept me engaged. And it wasn't really about the baseball, it was about this guy and his journey. And I was kind of with this, technically, it's not about the basketball. We only see about a minute and a half of actual basketball being played, and they like quickly cut over it and they show like cell phone footage of this game that was being played. But it's not about the basketball. But I still felt like I was like watching an alien society going about a very normal routine, but I didn't know what was going on, and therefore I didn't feel like I could really enjoy myself. I think if you took any one scene of this movie, I could appreciate a lot of the acting that was being done. Like you mentioned, just a plethora of actors that I didn't know were going to be in this because you had told me before that this was shot on an iPhone. And so I thought, okay, this is going to, even though this is Steven Soderbergh, like I've only seen probably one movie that he's done, but he's a well-known director. This is going to be him doing like a very low budget kind of thing. Like he would submit this to a film festival or something. I thought it was going to be something like that. but I recognized almost every actor that was in this movie. The leading guy was he was the main character in Castle Rock season one. That's what I know him from. Sywar from Heroes was in here. I mean, I guess people know him now more as Spock. But like every time we turn a corner, I'm like, oh hey, there's Domino from Deadpool 2, and hey, there's one of the kids from Stranger Things, and there's Bill Duke. Like, and I'm just like every time I'm like, wow, even more people that I recognize. But like I can see that they're doing some good acting, but I very rarely understood what was going on in this movie. And I don't know if I watched it a second time if that would help. I think part of it is the movie is just like I would have to do some significant research on like basketball lore to really get my head into what's going on with this movie.
Yeah, I think I had a pretty similar experience that you did. Um, I think it worked a little bit better for me. We've talked in the past about how I'm more into like the filmmaking, like style and process and all that. And I think that the way Steven Soderbergh makes this movie makes me enjoy the movie more than I think I would have. This feels a lot to me like a an Aaron Sorkin screenplay where there's a lot of dialogue. Basically, the entire movie is just a series of conversations, most of which are very fast-paced conversations. Um, but luckily, it's like unlike not a Steven Soderbergh screenplay, an Aaron Sorkin screenplay. Unlike an Aaron Sorkin screenplay, everyone doesn't sound identical in their verbiage, so that was pretty cool. Yeah, I think that when people are talking about uh, when people are talking about a specific subject in the jargon and lingo, there's a reason why people call that inside baseball. And like this is basically just inside baseball, but about basketball. Um, like if this was a movie about the comic book industry, and they were saying like comic book industry lingo, I think you and I would understand it like completely fine because we understand
Mm-hmm.
what stuff like I don't know. Um, if somebody refers to like the con or they say refer to like San Diego, we know what San Diego probably refers to in the comic book industry. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but like so basketball is probably the sport I've seen the most of. My dad is a huge basketball fan. I used to play basketball when I was a little kid. But the basketball industry itself is not something I really know the ins and outs of very well. So I'm not going to pretend like I understood like half of what happened in this plot. Like I understood the general shape and like, oh, Andre Holland is really like doing a thing all right. That's for sure. But he's pulling some kind of fast one on a lot of people. He's sort of like tricking people, but there are certain parts of it by the time I get to the end where I'm like, okay, because it tries doing a little thing where it jumps back in time to do some kind of reveal of, oh, this is something he was also up to like manipulate some some corner of the agency representatives who like are in charge of getting the lockout kind of done or whatever. Um, but at that point I was like, yeah, okay, I don't even know what's happening anymore. Like I thought I did, but now I don't. And like I don't know, like even just like the term like an NBA lockout, like just by the way that phrase is used, I had an idea of what it meant, but then I looked it up and then I realized, oh, there's only been like 4 NBA lockouts in history, and they're like very specific things that happen. And the most recent one was 2011. And so I'm thinking, well, I guess they're using Twitter, so I'm gonna just assume this is in 2011. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? But I don't think the movie is like I don't know, like I want to say like I don't think the movie realizes that it's not making that clear, but I also think that the movie doesn't even make an effort to make it clear that it's technically taking place in 2011. You know what I mean? Like there are some things where it is just like deliberately not giving some information. And what I think that does do is it's like because I'm like kind of of two minds about it because I'm thinking I remember there was a line of dialogue very early on where a character says I represent the players association. And I was thinking that's kind of a weird line of dialogue. Like why would somebody declare that they represent the players association if if this character already knows they represent the Players Association. And it's like the movie heard that internalized thought I had and went, okay, we're not going to explain anybody else's relationship to anything else. And I'm like, so then Kyle MacLachlan shows up, and like the woman who represents the Players Association starts talking with him, and I'm like, who's Kyle MacLachlan? I assume he's important. Like, and so it's like, I don't know, like I like you said, like you do feel like you're watching an alien society, and this is made for people who know about the ins and outs of the industry, of the basketball industry. That being said, I think I was able to enjoy this movie as much as I did, which is to say, fair enough. I don't think I'll ever revisit this movie, but I enjoyed it mostly because of the way in which it's made. Like, so Steven Soderbergh is always his own cinematographer and editor. He just uses pseudonyms to like credit cinematography and editing under. But I think the movie looks awesome. And I think that the editing keeps things moving in a way to where it's like, I have seen other caper movies where somebody's trying to like pull a job, whether it's a heist movie, whether it's a mystery, whether it's, whatever. And like, so I understand like structurally how like those movies kind of operate just in the way they feel. And I think this does, like, to the degree I understood anything that was happening in this movie, it's because of the way it's edited and constructed to feel like other movies where I do know what's going on. You know what I mean? And so I'll give it that. That's maybe a very specific positive, but this could have been very dry, and like I could have understood 0% of what was going on, but I understood, I think, about 40% of what was going on just kind of by virtue of the filmmaking. So yeah, I enjoyed it. Like I said, I don't know if I'll ever go back to it, but I did like a lot of the acting. And I guess we can maybe get into that a little later. But that being said, I feel a little bad about picking this because I don't know how much we're going to get out of it because I don't think either of us really understood what was going on half the time.
Yes, and I hate to say this, I'm glad that you were also confused, because that means that I'm not just an idiot. I'm glad that someone else had a similar experience that I did. And I will say, I think a lot of the reason that we understood what we did is because the actors are keeping us engaged. For example, there's a scene pretty early on where Andre Holland is talking with the main player that he is representing in this movie, and then his card is declined. And so then he walks to his office, and then he talks to Zazie Beetz. And then she says, like, he sees someone packing up. And then he says, why is everyone packing up? And she says, I've been trying to tell you this. And then we cut to he's in a meeting with Sylar, Zachary Quinto. And then Zachary Quinto is basically saying, I'm going to have to let you go. We don't have enough money to pay everyone during the lockout. And so, like, even though I don't necessarily understand who wants what during the lockout, like, I don't know, is this the players dangling the organization over a fire saying, like, without us you have nothing, or is this the organization that holds all the cards? Like, at different times I felt like it was different, like one side of this disagreement has the upper hand. But so even though I don't understand all the stakes in this particular chunk of the movie, I do understand, okay, Andre Holland is very nearly about to lose his job. And so, like, and I really like the acting there, where, like, Sylar isn't a mustache twirling boss who's going to enjoy firing Andre Holland. Like, he seems to, he even says, like, I definitely do not like this part of the job. But it's one of those things, like, there really, even though this movie is a pretty cut and dry, like, here's our antagonist and here's our protagonist story, I don't feel like anyone in it is necessarily the air quotes bad guy. Although there are times where I was questioning that a little bit. But I think everyone is making what could have been, if you had just flushed this entire cast and got a brand new group of people, this could have been a very dry movie. I think all of the actors here are really bringing fairly one-dimensional characters to life with little things, I think.
I would agree with that. So you knew Andre Holland as the lead of Castle Rock season 1. Mm-hmm. I knew him. I've not watched Castle Rock. I knew him as there's a movie called Moonlight. I think you've probably, like, you most definitely heard of it because La La Land won Best Picture at the Academy Awards for about 2 minutes, and they realized that they had like gotten the wrong ballot. They had gotten like Emma Stone winning Best Actress for La La Land, and somebody just accidentally read that. But in reality, Moonlight had won Best Picture, and so it's a Best Picture winner, Moonlight. Whoa, whoa, whoa. But Andre Holland is not the lead of that movie. He's so that movie is kind of split into three sections, and it's about a character named Chiron, and you see him as a child, as a teenager, and then as a fully grown man. Andre Holland plays like the friend of Chiron, like in the last segment of it. So he's not in it a whole lot, but he's really, really good in it. But he's also being, very kind of warm and calm, and that movie's very naturalistic. And this movie, he's really charismatic and engaging. And there's like 2 or 3 scenes where I almost just wanted to stand up and applaud, where I'm like, I have no idea what's happening in this plot, but you're selling me on this. I believe that you, Ray Burke, I believe you are doing this thing. You know what I mean? And then in hindsight, one of those things was just like a complete smoke screen. Like there's a scene where he is trying to convince somebody about like why it's important that he's having a meeting with Netflix, and why he's doing all these things, and how what it's really about is, getting the game in your own hands for just a second or something. And like he's really selling me on it. And then you find out later, he's like, oh yeah, I was just kind of saying that to like get somebody on board with something that wasn't even really going to happen. And I was like, well, I mean, I believed it, man. He reminds me, he has a very similar, I think, kind of charismatic energy that someone like Anthony Mackie naturally has. But since Anthony Mackie's probably going to be stuck playing, Captain Falcon, and like maybe the worst show I've ever seen in my life, I'm really happy that Andre Holland gets to like kind of show up and be a cool actor in movies like this. So, yeah, I will say though, like one of the things I was confused about is his dynamic with Zazie Beetz. Throughout most of the, like, so at the beginning we meet her and she's his assistant, and we hear that like, but then like later, like throughout most of the movie, they say like, she says, I don't work for you anymore. I'm not your assistant anymore. And I kept wondering why she was even hanging around. like, and so what I figured was going on was they have a scene where they're sitting down either at a table or a bar together. And she says, so what's the story here? Like way back when there was this, this thing that had happened, and you put out the story, like you put out this piece of information, and it completely changed what the narrative in the news was. So like, what's the story here? Like, what are we going to do to like change whatever situation we're in? And then from that scene on, she always says, I'm not his assistant anymore. I don't work for you anymore. But that's always when he's in the room with somebody else, usually the basketball player that he's representing. And so I was assuming this was like a long con where they were making everybody think that she didn't work for him anymore. And then in their last scene together, it's just the two of them without anybody else. It's probably the first scene since that scene earlier I had mentioned where they were in the bar or something together, and they reiterate that she doesn't work for him anymore. And then later he says that she's in a better place. She's not dead, but like
right, her career,
yeah, her career's in a better place, and professionally, that's what I was looking for. She's in a better place professionally. And I'm thinking like, oh, I completely misread that whole dynamic throughout this movie. But I mean, I think she's great in this. Like you said, it's a potentially one-dimensional character that is brought to life through her kind of spunk and personality. But I was a little confused, and if she doesn't work for Andre Holland anymore, why is she even here? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I was a little confused by that.
The best I could think, and this is kind of deflated by the very last thing in the movie, but I assumed, because throughout the movie you've got the basketball player, like the very first thing we see in the movie. I don't remember the actor who played the basketball player. What was that actor's name?
Looking it up, that is Melvin Gregg.
Okay, yeah, so Andre Holland is talking to Melvin Gregg, and Melvin Gregg's character has foolishly entered into a financial agreement with somebody that is going to hurt him, and he's not going to be able to uphold his end of the deal. And so Andre Holland is basically chewing him out for that. And he is, Melvin Gregg is portrayed as like, I just care about the money. I don't really care about anything beyond that. And Andre Holland throughout the movie is kind of preaching about how like this needs to be more than just playing basketball for money. Like you have the potential to really be something. And that's like throughout the movie he's, talking about like Netflix wants to turn you into a star or something like that. And then he gives him a present in the beginning of the movie, and then he says, I think he says, whenever you'll know when it's time to open it. And then at one point in the movie, Zazie Beetz and Melvin Gregg have relations. And then at the end of the movie, Melvin Gregg has fired Andre Holland as his representative. And then they go back to his place. And then Zazie Beetz opens the present. And I think it's called like How to Be a Black Athlete or Being a Black Athlete or something like that. And she reads it. And then when Melvin comes out of the shower, she just says, "You need to read this." And so that kind of threw my idea out the window, because I was thinking that Zazie Beetz, even though technically she doesn't work for Andre Holland anymore, that she believes in what he's selling. But then if she didn't even know about the book until that last scene, and she didn't know what was in the book, and then she's like moved nearly to tears by reading the book and tells him, "You need to read this," then that completely disregards what I thought was going on. So I don't know what's going on. Maybe it's just a simple, like, you treated me okay when I was working for you. So even though I'm not being paid to work for you, I will try to help you out in the next couple of days, while I'm getting ready to move on to wherever my career is going. Maybe that's what's going on. I think we're not necessarily meant to question it during the movie. It's just kind of, like you said, it's kind of a fast-paced heist movie where there is nothing in the heist. So she's here because she was there at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the ending because I was perplexed by it. It is sort of treated as a bit of a reveal, and this is again another thing where, like, if I was more, I feel like this is a film for a very specific audience, and if you are a part of that specific audience, I think you will really like this. Um, but like so the last time we see Andre Holland's character, he's walking into a meeting with this older gentleman with like a white beard, and they sit down, and then we get the reveal that, like, because in the first scene, um Andre Holland says that, like, the Bible is in this package, like that's his present.
Mm-hmm.
And then or not the Bible, it is a Bible. And when Zazie Beetz opens it, so I looked up, the book is called The Revolt of the Black Athlete.
Mm-hmm.
And I had noticed on Google, like, the picture of the author kind of caught my eye, and it was the person that he takes a meeting with at the very end, the
Oh,
older gentleman with the white beard, and like, so I was like, oh, I like, this is all like very connected, but that person is like this kind of celebrated American sociologist, and he, primarily works on, the athletic side of things as far as like where his field of analysis is. And I'm like, I feel like I need to just educate myself on sports and like ethics and sociology and like all of this stuff that it has a lot of history to it that I am just not privy to. And that's why I say, like, it's for a very specific audience. I'm just not that audience. You know what I mean? And so,
mm-hmm.
you can say, like, I don't know. You can say, like, I shouldn't have to look any of this stuff up to understand it. And I think, that's true. I shouldn't have to. But like you said, like, it does sort of, like, I was able to follow it as a sort of heist movie with this ending I didn't even understand. So maybe if I, like, studied up more, maybe if I was, like, just better educated on the lingo and who, like, non-athlete sports figures, like, who they are, like, maybe that guy he takes a meeting with, that sociologist who wrote that book, is like a very famous sports figure who never really played any games. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he was like a commentator and a critic about around that specific culture that I just wasn't even aware of. And maybe, like, the revolt of the black athlete is like, how in have you seen the movie Black Swan?
No.
Okay. So a lot of movies, like Black Swan or The Red Shoes or whatever, like, they're about people, like, and I'm sure you've seen that movie. Like, I could say this and you could point to like a movie or a TV show episode that is doing this exact same thing, where what they do is let's say I am making a movie about a stage production of The Wizard of Oz, all right? And then it's about an actress, and as she's playing Dorothy, her real life starts to mirror the events of The Wizard of Oz.
Mm-hmm.
So the line between like reality and the fiction, and like all that is starting to get blurred. Ooh, what's even? I know that like this probably makes you never want to watch these movies ever, but like um, uh, the thing is like I guess that's a bad example. I'm sorry, I'm a little all over the place today, but I was wondering if if the events of this movie were in some way just sort of mirroring what is being written about in that book that is revealed at the end. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
If like the movie, if the character of Ray, and sort of because he's the kind of POV character of this movie, by extension, like the movie itself, like are they sort of looking at that book and what's sort of being looked at or discussed? Or I assume it's a nonfiction book, and is it sort of using that as its own Bible? You know what I mean? Is the movie using that as its own Bible? Um, I don't know.
That could be. I at the end, whenever she started reading that book, I was thinking, okay, I know that this means something. I just don't know what it means, and I wasn't especially interested enough to look into it. I'm glad that you enjoyed this more than I did, and so you looked into that, and you got a little bit more out of the movie than I did because you connected that with the last scene with Andre Holland. I just kind of thought, okay, Andre Holland is back to doing whatever it was that he did in this movie. Now he's doing it, he's meeting with somebody, or maybe he's been promoted. Who knows? So like, uh, it's one of those things where if this was a movie about the comic book industry, I would say like, well, this all, it's clearly, it's pretty obvious to me what's going on, and it doesn't need to hold my hand. I know who Jim Shooter is. I know who, Roger Stern is. So if you're doing a movie about like, the behind the scenes stuff at Marvel in the 70s and 80s, like I don't need you to like slap me in the face and say Jim Shooter started working at DC Comics when he was 13. Like you don't need to, but at the same time, this is a weird example where like everyone else in the world knows more about baseball or basketball than you and I do. And so they're not going to need their hands held as much. But I could probably ask every human being that I know and they wouldn't have heard of this book. So I feel like you have to do some hand holding, and maybe like they should have had the book be referenced earlier than the second to last scene or the last scene whenever she's
Yeah,
reading it. Like
yeah,
maybe they could have referenced it somehow, and then she picks it up off the table and reads it or whatever. But that was one instance where I was like, I'm sure it means something. I'm just not really sure what.
yeah, and that's why I was saying earlier, like I was saying like I don't think I should have needed to look that stuff up in order to make that connection.
Hmm.
But that's also why I say I think this is just for a very specific audience, and maybe there are plenty of people who know about that are more into sports than I am, who are
Hmm.
in, you know what I mean, who are kind of into sports the way like you know how we know who like Roger Ebert is,
Yeah.
like maybe this guy is like the Roger Ebert or Pauline Kael of sports. You know what I'm saying? Like I
Hmm.
don't know, I don't know. Like I am sure this is probably, if somebody does like know all the ins and outs of sports and all that stuff and is listening to this podcast, they're probably just like pulling their hair out right now. I'm sorry, but I guess like what where do you want to go from here? Because I'm kind of pulling blanks here as far as like
So,
where to go.
um, well, one actor that I was thoroughly entertained by, I don't even know who it was, but it was close to the end. Kyle MacLachlan is talking to some bald guy. And this bald guy, I don't know what it was about his delivery that was cracking me up, but he said, like, I just discovered that there is a secret game being played, and I found that to be interesting for a variety of reasons. And just the way he was talking, I was dying laughing. And I'm not laughing at his performance. I think he's doing good, but he had a certain like cadence that he was using, and it kind of maybe this is just because I already had Twin Peaks on my mind. It kind of reminded me of Major Briggs from Twin Peaks just a little bit. Not
Yeah,
not
yeah.
quite not quite as warm as what Major Briggs would do, but like it kind of felt like that. Like if Major Briggs was a supervillain, this guy would be like the Lex Luthor Major Briggs type. But before that was just one thing I wanted to say. So at the end, we get a aha twist ending. Andre Holland planned all this all along, and I was like, what? Like, and I was thinking, surely there's like 1,000 different ways that this could have gone wrong, and like it didn't really seem to me. And this ties right in with I didn't understand what was going on, like over the course of the entire movie. Like I understood what was going on in each individual scene for the most part, but when you tie it all together, I was more perplexed. But at the end, when he's like telling Sylar, he's like, "Well, I did it. I saved your bacon, and we didn't lose any players." And I was thinking, "Are you sure you did all of this?" Like, I was just thinking, like, what if anything had gone wrong? Like, what if the your guy who is like consistently acted like an idiot throughout the entire movie? What if, like, while you were planning this game between him and the guy that he was arguing with on Twitter, what if, he decided that he was going to sign with another team, like right then and there? Or what if, because so they make a point of saying that a basketball player shouldn't have sex before a game because that ruins their game. And he has sex with Zazie Beetz. And then he goes to this high school to like give a speech to these kids. And then this other guy that he has been arguing with on Twitter, he shows up. And then they have a spur of the moment game right then and there. And then Andre Holland stops the game right when it's tied because he knows that these two are going to be playing together and he doesn't want to damage their potential working relationship. Okay, but did Andre Holland plan for this guy to have sex with Zazie Beetz? What if he hadn't had sex with her and he absolutely crushed that guy? Or what if he was absolutely destroyed because he did have sex with her? What if this other guy got like 92-0 because this guy had sex? Like, there are so many different moments in this movie where I'm thinking there is no way that Andre Holland could have planned for this, and like this particular instance is not something that he accounted for. But at the end of the movie, it's trying to tell us, haha, isn't he so smart? He orchestrated everything. And I'm thinking, no, he didn't.
Yeah, there was stuff like that where I was confused. Like, so I sort of had a little bit of the opposite of you, where up until a point where I would not really understand what was happening in any given scene until like 2 scenes later, when they would like reveal a piece of information that I was still, like my brain is still trying to figure out the scene from 2 scenes ago. But then in this current scene I'm watching, they'll say something and I make a connection. I'm like, oh, okay, so that's what was going on 2 scenes ago, I think. Mm-hmm. And then when you get to like there's a point where it jumps back ahead like 48 hours to show you like what Andre Holland or what Kyle MacLachlan's been up to, and how Andre Holland's been talking with him, and how he's been talking to this kind of funny bald guy. Like, you get those scenes, and like when it does kind of play that as like a bit of like a ha ha ha, but here's what's also been like, it's like a little like a reveal. It's like in a heist movie when you find out that after everything's gone wrong and after somebody in the heist has like betrayed the main criminal, it reveals, haha, I knew you were going to try to get me, so that's why I paid a little person to like be hiding in the walls at precisely this moment, so that when you would betray me, he would bonk you in the head, and that's why right now there's somebody coming out of the ceiling to bonk you on the head with like a bowling pin or something. You know what I mean? Like when we got to that scene, I was like, okay, I'm lost. And from that scene on, I really didn't know what was going on, or like why things had played out. Like, you have that part where he's like talking to Zachary Quinto, and he's like, all right, don't you see it? It was all me. And I'm like, okay, I know like some people like kind of getting on Christopher Nolan for doing a little bit of the hand holding thing, unless he's making Tenet. But like, I need Christopher Nolan to jump out and like write the next scene to have, what's his face? Like, or like, I need to have Andre Holland just like explain scene by scene what he was doing and what his actual intentions were, to even understand what's going on. You know what I mean? Like, I need that guy, like in Knives Out, when you have that scene where what's his face? Daniel Craig. When you have Daniel Craig explaining what his observation when he figures it out at the end, and it's like a 10-minute scene of him just explaining everything that happened in the case. Like, I need that scene to be like where he's talking to Zachary Quinto at the end, but it's not. He just kind of, because they're both inside men and are kind of aware of more like aware of the consequences of the events of the last few days, they're not explaining it. So I'm like, oh, okay. The only thing they explain is, it was me, James. I was the author of all your pain, and that's about it. And so, it's a bit tricky to kind of talk about for me.
And that's what's great about any mystery story, like any episode of Murder, She Wrote. Jessica Fletcher explains this is how you did it, and this is how I figured out that you did it. And like in theory, a good mystery story, if you are really paying attention, you're going to pick up on all the clues that the detective picked up on. Now, a lot of times mystery stories they're not going to play fair with that. They're going to introduce clues that the detective found that you, the audience, was not aware of when watching it. But this movie doesn't really have the denouement scene that it needs. It needs to have that scene, like you're saying, where maybe Andre Holland has a wife or a son, and the son is like, "Daddy, I don't understand how you did it." And he says, "Well, you see, son." And then like you show a black and white, and it shows him like, like while he's explaining to the son, we're seeing footage of him talking with Kyle MacLachlan, and then like writing a letter to Hulu or something like that. And you're right. It needs something like that. And then the people who are in the know, they can roll their eyes and say, well, obviously. And then the people like us who aren't in the know, we can say, oh, okay, I get it now.
Yes, exactly. Maybe you have like a journalist character who's reporting on the lockdown that people kind of give information to that, that they wouldn't, that, like they explain it to the journalist like they're a layman or something. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so when they then start having conversations with other people in the biz, like, then, I remember when the Players Association lady, I remember when she explained to the journalist what that slang meant and like what this kind of deal they're trying to crack is and what the consequence of X or Y. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, mm-hmm. Like, I don't know, like that's just kind of me making a suggestion. But yeah, so.
One thing that confused me, speaking of, many things that confused me, early on, Zazie Beetz meets with that one woman, and Zazie Beetz says, Andre Holland is acting a little off. And then the woman is like, ooh, like she's rubbing her hands together, and she's like, now I have some information that he did not want me to have. And so I'm thinking, okay, these two are enemies. Like, Andre Holland wants the lockdown to end, but he's in favor of like the players need more money, and she wants it to end, but she's in favor of like the NBA wants more money or something like that. And because they're acting like that, she's acting like she is an opponent of Andre Holland. But then every other scene in the movie, these two are acting like they're friends and they're working together, like they're trying to help each other achieve their goals. And that's where I'm just like, okay. Like, and then later, like you said, Kyle MacLachlan shows up. And then it's like, who is he? What is his role in all this? And like, I needed like, it could have been like, I can't think of a movie that does this, but sometimes a TV show will do this, where like, as soon as we see this woman, pause the screen, and then like text shows up on the screen, like the Suicide Squad movie, but do it better. Do something like that, where it's like you are giving us the pertinent information. It's cutesy, it's stylistic, and then you move on with your movie.
Yeah, I want to say this is one of my picks. It's probably the shortest movie I've ever picked. It's only 90 minutes. Mm-hmm. But like, I didn't plan for this. I know I typically pick things that are, a little confusing, but I didn't mean for this. This movie was more confusing than movies that are like twice its length that I've seen. So that I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're right. It would be nice. Like, and I like that movie. The Irishman did that. That's a 3.5 hour long movie. So I doubt you'll be watching that anytime soon. But they do a cool thing in that movie where they'll introduce characters and then they'll say their name and like how they die. And there's like something about that I thought was like really cool. And yeah, no, you're right. If I don't know, it's like you have this menacing image of Kyle MacLachlan strutting down the hallway, and it like just freeze frames, and it's like, this is this person, chairman of the NBA or something like that. I think that'd be cool. Mm-hmm. I must say though, Kyle MacLachlan is in amazing shape. There's a scene where he gets into a sauna, and I'm like, how old is this dude? But like, he still has like abs. This is so insane to look at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. He also had a line that I really liked. It's when he's talking to that woman, and he says, like, I was talking with the players, and she says, you're not allowed to do that. And he said, no, I just emailed them. I may be old school, but I know how to hit send. And I was like, that is great. I wish we had more of him here. And he is, you're right, like, he's not in it a lot. I'd say the first half of the movie, he doesn't show up once. But then once he is in it, he has a couple of really good scenes. And I liked his interactions that he had with the other characters.
I did too. I also really liked Bill Duke, who I don't think his voice in this movie is very different than I think his voice in every other thing I've seen. I think every other movie I've seen him appear in, it's some kind of action movie where he's playing a tough guy, and so he always has a bit of a a strength and like a kind of a punch with his voice. And in this one, he's just kind of a very old guy, and he's just kind of speaking pretty softly, generally speaking. But there's a whole kind of angle with his character about the history of basketball as like a black man's game, and how they kind of he has like there's some like allusions to like the institution of slavery with him, and like kind of the way basketball was sort of commodified and like taken from its roots and like taken as like the sort of there's a game that gets played on top of the game, and that's referenced a few times. I don't know, like all of that stuff. I feel like if I was more aware of, say, the revolt of the black athlete, I might be more in tune with that kind of undercurrent. But like, as far as just that character goes, I thought that was a pretty cool angle to have.
Yes, so I was a little confused about that because anytime anyone mentions slavery in regards to basketball, he says, hey, you need to say, I love God and all of his black people. And so I was confused because the cast is almost entirely black. Like there's one scene where everyone in the office is black, and the woman says something about slavery, and then they're all like, whoa, now you can't do that. And I was a little confused because the way that like Bill Duke and Andre Holland and Zazie Beetz are acting, they're acting like this other woman is like pro-slavery, and maybe I just really misread the scene, but the way they're acting, they're like, how dare you say something like that? And I was thinking like it'd be different if like the evil Major Briggs or if Kyle MacLachlan, if they said something about slavery, like what I'm saying. But it was like whenever you'd have a scene between two black people and one of them would say something, and Bill Duke would shoot them a look and be like, hey, say the words. And I was a little I feel like maybe that was clever, but if it was going way over my head, and so I didn't understand what was going on there.
Yeah, I know like there are, obviously like black people are not a monolith and all that, and different people have different opinions on what culturally speaking attitudes should be, and so I know like for example there are some historically there have been I'm really sorry guys, I'm gonna have to try to traverse a minefield because I'm not black. I don't know a lot about this stuff. So
wait, what? No, I'm just kidding.
I know. I've only been listening to your voice all these years. I just assumed. Yeah, no, I know, like, for example, there are some black people who think that, the N-word should never be spoken. It should just be eradicated from this earth entirely. There are some who think that, hey, we should actually reclaim that word. And, now it's something that, can't be used against us. And like, there's a lot of different opinions, a lot of different experiences, and a lot of different, methods of, trying to integrate black culture into like mainstream, like, and like all that stuff, like what should be representative of air quotes black culture unquote, and all that kind of stuff. Like there's like a lot of that, and the Bill Duke character kind of struck me as a very old fashioned kind of black activist who was like, we should not try to even like mention slavery, like, what I'm saying, like that should be something we're above talking about, and that shouldn't define us, and we should maybe try to strive. Like, I don't know, these are just like things I've heard in like documentaries of like people talking about, and I don't know, like I know that's just again me bringing something outside of the movie into it, but he did strike me as like kind of an older kind of black activist who maybe the kids these days maybe have different opinions to them, you know what I'm saying? So
that's fair, and I don't think that's entirely an inaccurate reading, because you have scenes where, like, when he's interacting with that kid from Stranger Things and that other girl, like they're kind of like, what are you talking about, Gramps? Like, this isn't, you're not in charge of me. And he's like, this is my court, you're on my court, so like there is that scene. Yeah. And so yeah, that's a good, I'm glad you kind of you said that in that way, because while I was confused in the moment, I think that's a good reading that kind of makes a little bit more sense with you saying that. Because I was kind of expecting, with all the talk, like, because it happens a couple of times before we get the explanation. Like at one point, Andre Holland is talking to that woman, and he quickly says, I love God and all of his black people. And I'm thinking like, what? and then there's a scene, or maybe that scene where between Andre Holland and Bill Duke happened first, and so it happened a couple times, and I kept thinking like, there's a thing here, but I don't know what it is, and so like I was expecting that to lead to a more racially charged discussion between like Kyle MacLachlan and Bill Duke, or Kyle MacLachlan and Andre Holland, or something like that. And maybe that would have been a little too simplistic. I I very nearly said it may have been a little too black and white of a discussion. But, um, I guess I'm glad that they didn't go in that direction. That they went in a direction where it's a little more nuanced, and I think that I appreciate that.
Yeah, and like that was one of those things where I was kind of, it gets brought up several times, and I'm glad that they had a scene to explain that, because that's not just like industry jargon. That's a very specific thing to that character. So I'm glad they did explain that.
Yes. There are a few different moments where the movie will kind of pause, and we get characters who, these are either real life sports figures who are like interviewing with someone that we're not seeing, or these are people who are playing sports figures. And I'll be honest, I skipped every one of those scenes. Maybe those are because we get one scene at the beginning where somebody, it's an interview, and then we get into the movie, and then from that point forward, every time we got one of those, I just would kind of, okay, 10 seconds, 10 seconds. Like I would just kind of fast forward through that to get into the rest of the thing. So earlier when we were talking about like the revolt of the black athlete, it's entirely possible that something happened in those scenes that informs the rest of the movie. But I felt like it was scenes from a documentary that someone accidentally edited into this narrative. Like I felt like it didn't really add anything.
I think it's mostly just supposed to add texture. It's one of those things where I've not watched a lot of Steven Soderbergh's movies, so I know that in other movies that I have not seen, he does sort of have people coming in to play themselves, or he will cast non-actors in leading roles. I know that there was a film that he just cast a porn star in as like the lead, and it's just like one of those things that this felt like a very Steven Soderbergh touch to me, even though like I'm more only aware of him just sort of in film culture as opposed to being aware of his movies. But he so like a lot of those interviews are just kind of them it's three players who were like, I think the number one draft pick of whatever year they were rookies, and they just kind of talk about what it's like being a rookie and like that mindset you're in, and they kind of mention how like I think kind of like the way the sort of consensus at the end of that is, if you're not playing to have fun, then you're going to get too caught up in trying in the semantics and like the competition of being the best and like what you need to be doing and like kind of treating it like a machine, then you're just going to kind of fall as a result of it. And like one of them talks about how he only scored like 22 points in like X amount of games and didn't do very well. And he had like his like background on his phone was like the Rookie of the Year award, and then he's kind of switched that out because he was realizing that mentality of striving for greatness at the cost of enjoying yourself was kind of costing him the greatness. And so and they also kind of talk about like representation of like your agents and like your management and whatnot, and like how some of them are there to protect you and some of them are there to exploit you, and kind of you're sort of getting the player's perspective on how just kind of cracking into the industry is. And I guess in that way, like that does, for me anyways, that there was like some POV there that like I didn't get in the rest of the movie. Like that's maybe the most handholdy stuff there, but you do have to sort of like thematically link it to what's going on. So
okay, I probably should have sat through those scenes, but I was kind of just sitting here thinking like, wait a minute, these aren't characters in the movie. Why are we listening to them? And I mean, it's like 10 minutes of the movie. And I was like, and this is a short movie, but I was thinking like, I don't need any of this. And hearing you explain it, it makes sense. But I still wish it could have been more integrated into the movie in a way where I didn't feel like I was watching unrelated documentary clips.
I get that. Yeah. Do you remember when we were on Who Reviews the Reviewers together, and every so often I would just have like a black and white cutaway to something,
Yeah.
That's what that reminded me of. I'm like, did I make this movie or something? What's going on here?
Steven Soderbergh is a time traveling Connor Nielsen from the future.
Oh
Um,
no, that means I go bald. No.
yeah.
Uh, no,
I
Steven Soderbergh looks just like Moby,
oh yeah.
the artist from the turn of the century. Yeah.
Uh,
No.
I don't really have a whole lot else to say about this movie. I don't think I dislike the film. I think it's a fine movie, but like you, I cannot see any reason that I would go back to it.
Yeah. I will say, like, I recently invested in a new TV, and this movie, like, the photography of it is so crystal clear, and like, um, I personally like in the debate of film versus digital, I'm more of a film guy. I like the way film looks a little bit more than digital, but man, when David Fincher and Steven Soderbergh, who are like those two are like fully on the digital train. Whenever they make a movie, they make the digital look so good, and yeah, I thought this looked really awesome. I guess like my last note is I really like the first scene of the movie a lot, where it does a really good job of just sort of establishing character, where you have Andre Holland, who just seems to be really, really smart and knowledgeable about how you're supposed to traverse the minefield of, being an up and comer who doesn't know anybody. And he's kind of explaining how Eric, the Melvin Gregg character, how he was kind of a dummy and how he handled the situation. And then like the way that scene ends is his card is declined. And that sort of takes some of the wind out of your sails, and it makes you look at him and go, oh, you're a little bit of a hustler. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like this is, or not, I guess hustler is maybe the wrong term, but he's a little bit of a fast talker. He's like a bit of a salesman in his own way, like where he's saying, be cautious of the salesman, Eric. And then in his own way, he is a salesman. And so like, I thought that was a really cool opening scene. Like I said, I didn't understand any of the jargon, but like I understood what was happening of like, oh, this is a young, naive rookie. This is an agent who is like some experience, and he's like really good at talking. You know what I'm saying? Like I got those elements out of it, and that's why I think I like that first scene so much.
Yeah. Um, I only had one more thing. When Melvin Gregg, when they're at the high school and the other guy has challenged him to a game, Melvin Gregg just doesn't. He really does. His character just seems like an idiot like through the entire movie because he just says, I had sex, and everyone's like, whoa, what? And I thought that was kind of funny. But yeah, I think that some people will probably really enjoy this movie. But I think I'm safe in saying this wasn't really made for us. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
But hey, not everything is. This was a blind pick for me, but
Hmm.
yeah, it happens, right?
Yeah, happens to me very often. I most of my picks are blind picks. Is it time for me to choose what we will be talking about next time?
I think it is Comics Kid.
Well, ironically, this is going to not be a blind pick. This is going to be something I have seen many times. I am choosing the movie Willow, which is on Disney Plus. This is a fantasy movie that was directed by Ron Howard, I believe, and this is a Lucasfilm production as well. And the actor is Gavin O'Harley, who is in Twin Peaks. He only was in 2 episodes. He was one of the Mounties who came to tell Dale Cooper, "Hey, you're in trouble with the Canadians, pal." And so he plays a pretty big role in Willow, or I'll say he plays a pretty big supporting character in Willow. This is a childhood favorite of mine. I cannot tell you how many times I have watched this movie. I really like it, and hopefully this isn't going to be a situation where Connor says I hated this movie and then he pokes holes in it and tells me why I'm a fool for loving it. But I don't think you've seen this before, have you?
Comics Kid, I'm so happy you're picking this movie because I have never seen it. And my brother works at a comic book shop, and his coworker, like way back when, before my brother was even working there, we're going back years, like maybe 5 years. He's been asking me almost every time I walk into the store, whenever he's working, if I've seen Willow yet. And I always have to say no. As a matter of fact, last week it was the first time I'd seen him in like many, many months. And the first thing he said when I walked in was, "So have you seen Willow yet?" And I can finally cross this one off. I'm very excited. In my head, I always sort of get this crossed with the movie Legend from 1985 with Tom Cruise and Tim Curry. And I have seen that. So I'm going to finally be knocking out some of these like 80s fantasy movies that, never really took off the way something like Star Wars did. So I'm very happy you picked this. I'm excited.
Yeah. I was like, this whole time we were doing this podcast, I have a physical list of things that movies and TV shows, and I was trying to find something that's streaming, and I was like, I don't really like, I can't find this anywhere, or like, I don't really want to watch this right now. And so then I was like, wait a minute, that guy. And so I don't know how much I've even talked about this movie on my channel, but like I say, it's one that I have watched many times growing up. So I'm very interested to see what you will have to say about it.
I'm very happy to watch it because I know Val Kilmer's in it, and Val Kilmer is a cool dude. So,
yep, or at least I like him in some movies. So yeah, that's all that we have for now. So we will be back next time to talk about Willow. In the meantime, I'm the Comics Kid 2099.
And I am Connor Nielsen.
And we'll see you guys in the future. Have a good one.